the far north of Australia. Few places on Earth are ruled by the forces of nature like Kakadu. Each year it's transformed by lightning and fire, drenched by monsoon rains, and parched by the tropical sun. Yet come fire or floodwater, each day begins and ends with the same unmistakable chorus, the call of the blue-winged kookaburra. In an old gum tree, a pair of kookaburras are nesting. Their daily calls, quite different from the laughing kookaburras, confirm the ownership of this territory. For their chicks, this first year will be the toughest. If they survive, they'll join their parents in the dawn chorus of this magnificent wilderness. Beneath an ancient escarpment, many animals will share the changing seasons in the territory of this one family of kookaburras on the edge of a billabong. For hundreds of magpie geese and other wetland birds, the billabong is an oasis during the dry season. But it's no safe haven. It's October. 6 months have passed with little rain, and the waterhole is drying out fast. As the day heats up, the forest beyond the water's edge can appear dry and lifeless. But looks are deceptive. This patch, just 500 meters across, has been the home of one family of kookaburras for several generations. And for many years they've used the same hollow to nest in. Yet still the survival of their dynasty remains precarious. All around them, the vast eucalypt forest is divided into territories occupied by other kookaburras, and their neighbours are forever testing their borders. The forest floor is divided into territories on a much smaller scale. Kalia skinks negotiate with their tails. Above the dry leaves, the larger Gilbert's dragon greets the morning with a wave. Like the kookaburra's call, these daily rituals tell neighbours that the owner's still at home. But even such subtle little signals are dangerous when there are eyes in the forest above. Like many other smaller kingfishers, blue-winged kookaburras get most of their food from the dry forest floor. They can readily tackle prey larger than this dragon, but smaller reptiles and insects are chosen for small mouths. These adults may live together for a decade, and they'll also remain faithful to this one small area of forest that they share with many other creatures. The awakening of the antilopine kangaroos attracts the Gilbert's dragon, for their movements disturb insects hidden in the fallen leaves. And for this active, insect-eating lizard, a tired kangaroo makes an ideal vantage point. But the male kookaburra had an even better view. The father's call directs the blind hatchling to another meal. These giant kingfishers usually lay 2 eggs, but this pair has gambled on the rains arriving at just the right time to provide enough food for a larger family. Their 3rd chick is about to hatch. Though still blind, the older chicks don't seem to welcome their younger brother. From now on, there'll be even greater competition for food, and there's rarely enough food for 3. At least the nest hollow protects the hatchling from dangers outside. Nesting in the bushes below, young woolly wagtails are exposed both to the elements and to predators. A young dingo, part of the family group whose territory overlaps the kookaburras, is on his way to the billabong for a drink. But he's heading towards the wagtail's nest. The chicks crouch low as the dingo passes just meters from the nest, unaware of the snack perched above him. A potential meal for dingoes and even kookaburras, the wagtails must leave their vulnerable nest as soon as possible. With several dingoes around, the magpie geese are taking no chances. At 36 degrees in the shade and rising, many animals rely increasingly on this shrinking supply of water. But some choose to drink from opposite sides of the billabong. Now it's the wagtails that take advantage of a furry perch from which to catch insects. At the forest edge, the 2 wagtail chicks have left their nest, but they're not yet ready to hunt for themselves. Only with longer tails can these fledglings live up to their name, for the characteristic wagging of the tail may be used by the adults to flush out insects hiding on the ground. Mind you, watching the movements of larger animals is an even better technique for that. The wallabies have other animals to keep an eye on. Saltwater crocodiles, up to 6 meters long, occasionally supplement their fish diet with much larger victims. This time, it's caught the wallaby. Brute force is how the crocodile rips off small mouthfuls, and how others snatch even larger shares. The smaller crocodile that made the kill is driven away, while others are left to fight for a substantial meal. The winner won't need to eat again for the rest of the dry season. Little corellas live in large groups without such fierce competition. On the edge of the drying billabong, ripe seeds are now so abundant that there are plenty to share. Pairs of these parrots form partnerships as long-lasting as the kookaburras, and with no shortage of food, they've plenty of time to play around. The dry season may provide enough food for seed-eating birds and large crocodiles to take time out between meals, but insects and reptiles are hard to come by. Even the most caring and hard-working of kookaburras will raise no young unless the rains arrive within a month, when these 3 youngsters are due to leave their nest. Until then, the edge of the billabong will be a vital source of scarce food, a prime piece of real estate, and one that may soon need extra recruits to defend it. To their east lies the last suitable kookaburra territory before the escarpment, home not just to a pair, but a family of 5. If these extra birds are to set up their own territories, they must move down towards the billabong, for little food and no nest hollows can be found on the steep slopes that rise behind them. This is a landscape of inhospitable beauty, sculpted by the elements. Gullies in the sandstone plateau channel the water that feeds the billabong via a lowland creek, but now this is barely flowing. Small fish struggle in vain against the dying stream. Larger ones are already doomed. Trapped in the last waterhole at the source of the billabong, eel-tailed catfish provide a feast not for kingfishers, but for black cormorants. Yet they're not defenseless. When seized, they lock their 3 poisonous spines at right angles. This makes them hard to swallow, but much easier for other cormorants to steal. It takes a thief to catch a thief. Whistling kites ensure that justice is swift and poetic. The feeding frenzy is as furious as it is brief. As the dry season reaches its height, the last waterway is choked to a standstill by thousands of putrefying fish. cut off from the creek that once filled it, the billabong has only days to last. Kookaburras can cope without drinking, but there's no escape from the relentless heat. The inside of the nest becomes hot and stifling. When he's 10 days old, the youngest chick's eyes begin to open. He can now see the older nestlings responsible for harassing him. Still they tower above him and get the lion's share of the food. And with their bills tipped with sharp hooks, which are lost before adulthood, the larger chicks are specially equipped to rule the roost. During the heat of the day, they all conserve energy by sleeping. But every visit by one of the parents prompts another fierce struggle among them. Even the largest chick gets little nutrition from a mouthful of scaly wings. The youngest gets nothing at all. He can't survive this treatment for long. As the billabong dries out, it exposes new characters. The long-necked turtle must escape from the roasting sun by digging into the cool mud. A water python has no such attachment to the dying billabong. It must somehow find its way out of the quagmire to the floodplains beyond. The trouble is, it doesn't seem to know how to get there. This python is large enough to take a magpie goose, but they have already flown. Only the resident family of mud-sifting burdekin ducks are left, and they're hardly going to be taken by surprise now. The track reveals where the turtle has buried itself. It'll wait there perhaps for days, perhaps for weeks until the rains return. Larger reptiles are stranded too. One crocodile has risked the perils of the baking sun to be first to re-establish its territory when rain brings the billabong back to life. Dust devils dance on the dry plains, sucking the parched soil high into the thermals above. Sensing a sudden increase in humidity, termites construct fragile towers of earth, grain by grain. During this brief exposure to the daylight world, the blind and defenseless workers are guarded by a ring of soldiers, with pointed orange heads specialised for squirting poison at any intruders. Built for just 1 day a year, these chimneys from the termites' underground tunnels allow winged adults to launch themselves safely on this annual quest for a mate. For a few brief moments, wings fill the air, and wood swallows and pratincoles gorge themselves on the ephemeral harvest. As the heat and humidity intensify late into the afternoon, the change of weather is evident to all. The storms have finally arrived. The transformation of the kookaburra's territory has begun. Fed by the brief afternoon storms, water plunges from the escarpment. But this is just a prelude to the real wet season. The monsoons have yet to arrive. Within 3 weeks, local showers on the bare, cracked mud have already filled the billabong. A lake now separates the kookaburras from their rivals in the sandstone foothills. Each day the calling ritual continues. The kookaburras assess the strength of the opposing gang and of each individual. One day, one of them may need a new partner, and he or she could come from next door. While the kookaburras are preoccupied, an olive python looks for a shady hollow. Unlike the water python, which makes its living off dusky rats on the floodplains, this is a serpent of the forest, and its dart is much broader. Fully feathered and 1 month old, the young kookaburras are nearly ready to leave their nest. Like all pythons, this is a constrictor. It squeezes the life out of its victims before swallowing them whole. The youngest and skinniest cowers at the back of the nest. Unaware of the danger, his parents continue to defend their territory. After its meal, the python returns to the forest floor. Miraculously, the youngest chick remains unscathed. His parents return from their border dispute. but they're too late for their two strongest youngsters. Now the smallest chick will commandeer all of the food. His prospects have just improved dramatically. For 2 months, the regular afternoon showers will provide the only relief from the intense midday heat. Rain bathing helps the birds keep their feathers in good condition, but so perhaps can damp soil. The kookaburras dive repeatedly into the ground, apparently to pick up mud. The female, distinguished by her brown tail, joins her mate and seems to work the damp soil into her plumage. In the nest, hygiene is more of a problem. After several weeks of rain, the nest is a seething mass of maggots. They thrive amid the damp debris of scales and bones and make it a thoroughly uncomfortable place. But relief is at hand. From their own leafy nests in the canopy, green ants pay a visit. For these workers, the young kookaburra's chamber is a rich hunting ground. Like the termites, they too have winged queens to prepare for their mating flights. But these are not triggered by the first showers of the wet season. These green ants are awaiting the monsoon. The November showers have conjured up an abundance of insects and the animals that hunt them. With the young kookaburra now heavier than they are, his parents look out for larger meals. With no competition from bullying siblings, the young kookaburra has grown quickly. Despite his shorter tail, an adaptation to life in a cramped nest, he's now ready to fly. Well, almost ready. His parents can see that landing will take some practice. Having crash-landed into another tree hollow, he'll have to fledge all over again. His first attempts at flying have left him exhausted. For several months, he'll continue to beg from his parents. In fact, he may never leave them. This is a good territory, and his best chance of breeding is to stay here in the hope of inheriting his parents' patch of the forest. But first, he's got to learn to hunt for himself. For much of the dry season, other creatures lay hidden high within his territory. With the return of the rain, frill-necked lizards have become more active. The adults are too large for kookaburras to tackle, so it's safer for them to show off. It's now their turn to divide this patch of forest into territories with their own flamboyant displays. Two large males are staking claims to the same patch of forest, and it's just not big enough for both of them. The dispute cannot be settled from afar, so the rival lizard approaches. The present owner leaps down to meet his adversary. When displays are not enough, fights must follow. Neither can afford a serious injury. The smaller intruder quickly retreats. January brings a sweeping change to the character of Kakadu. From the northwest, a veil of rain descends over the forest. This is no local shower. This is the monsoon, and it may bring rain for days on end. The water rises quickly into the margins of the forest, flooding the edge of the kookaburra's territory and the dingo's hunting ground. The rain falls faster than it can be soaked up by the saturated soil. The long-necked turtle has been released from its muddy refuge and restored to its home in the newly flooded forest. Every animal is soaked to the skin. A blanket of cloud hangs overhead, and the rain falls for many days and nights. The transformation of Kakadu is now spectacular. For 3 months the monsoon waxes and wanes. At its height, the rivers burst their banks, and only the tops of trees protrude from the flooded plains. Many animals are stranded. The water python is quite at home, but the goanna must wait days for the water to subside. The monsoon floods engulf part of the kookaburra's territory. For some creatures, the annual floods signal the start of a breeding season. For the kookaburra, now nearly 5 months old, it's time to find food for himself on the edge of this new swamp. The dingo also has lessons still to learn. In this unfamiliar landscape, strange new characters take the stage. A movement at the forest edge attracts him into the speargrass grown tall on monsoonal rain. Something smells interesting in a clump of pandanus. The dingo is deterred by the spiky foliage. Its inhabitants are left unharmed. These are the chicks of the pheasant kukul, a hunter of the undergrowth. Unlike cuckoos, their closest relatives, these large birds make their own nests. And with frogs and grasshoppers now in abundance, this pair has started a family all their own. Within the swamp nearby, bar-breasted honey-eaters have waited not for food, but for the floods themselves, in order to build their nest above water, safe from the dingo and other predators. So rich is the supply of caterpillars elsewhere in the neighbourhood that young honey-eaters can quickly move off to feed on their own. These parents are already making their second nest of the season. With silk stolen from spiders' webs and bark stripped from the paperbark trees, these birds have no need to rely on tree hollows to make themselves a secure home. Within 2 days, the construction is nearly complete, and the female tries it out for strength and comfort. They don't risk reusing their original nest. Perhaps this isn't strong enough for the rigours of 2 broods. But others are not so choosy. Fattened with maggots from the kookaburra's hole, large-winged green ants have landed from their first and only flight. They too need silk to make their nests high in the forest canopy, but only their larvae have silk-producing glands. Perhaps for this reason many queens join forces in an act of remarkable collaboration. All lay their eggs in the same hanging basket, and soon they'll have enough silk-producing larvae of their own in the honey-eater's deserted nursery. Pieces of paperbark fallen from the honey-eater's delicate constructions have helped a pair of grebes make a nest that floats. Although this keeps their eggs safe from most predators, The departure of the monsoon clouds has left them exposed to another danger. How can the adults keep their eggs cool enough while they find food in the surrounding swamp? The solution is for each to return regularly to shower the nest with water. This unusual behaviour keeps the vegetation moist and the eggs at just the right temperature. The same pair of grebes may return here each year, but both they and their young must disperse before this magical swamp changes once more. By April, the tall grass has been dried to a carpet of crisp brown straw. Camouflage will do little to protect grasshoppers here. The grass becomes food now for the inevitable consequence of Kakadu's extreme cycle of wet and dry. Once, only lightning started these fires across northern Australia. But since Aboriginal people first arrived here, maybe 60,000 years ago, most fires have been started by people. For hundreds of fork-tailed and whistling kites, the continuing practice of this earliest of farming techniques provides another chance of a free meal as they scan the fire front for fleeing or roasted grasshoppers. But this inferno has spread into the kookaburra's territory. Though kookaburras can profit from the cleared undergrowth and from victims of the fire, they can suffer too. Even after the fire front has passed, the young bird must watch as the tree in which he was raised is consumed by flames. From April to September, the smell of smoke will often fill the forest air. The kookaburras must now find a new nest if their dynasty is to survive. But as life and colour quickly return after the fire, they have more pressing needs. Watched intently by the young kookaburra, his neighbours are calling right on their border. These brazen calls must be answered by a different display at a special tree on the border of his territory. Large hollows are so vital to kookaburras that the displays they use to check out potential nest hollows have become territorial rituals. One of the neighbours dives to and from a symbolic nest hollow, giving a distinctive call, much as mammals use scent to mark the borders of their territories. The young kookaburra joins his parents in responding to their neighbour's display. At last they can hold their own against their neighbours. Yet perhaps, by so regularly testing and reinforcing this territorial border, which hasn't changed in years, these two neighbouring groups are not so much deterring each other as ensuring that no outsiders can invade. Perhaps these apparent rivals share a common interest after all. Smaller nest hollows seem much easier to find. These rare Gordian finches have found a finch-sized hole not far from a spring on the forest floor. But as the dry season takes hold once more, larger hollows are increasingly in demand. Flocks of black cockatoos have returned to the kookaburra's territory. Like the finches, with their diet of dry seeds, they must regularly quench their thirst. But there's competition for the water. Sulphur-crested cockatoos are top of this pecking order. They're residents within the kookaburra's territory, and they're not giving up their water supply or their nearby nest hollows for anyone. By November, the young kookaburra is a year old and a full-fledged member of the daily chorus. His territory contained just enough old trees with large hollows for his parents to find a new unoccupied nest. Now they have 3 more chicks to feed. Unlike many of the other birds born within this territory during the year, the young kookaburra has been allowed to stay home. With all nearby feeding and nesting areas already taken, this was his best option. He even helps his parents by feeding the youngsters, now that he's the older brother. This dynasty has already lasted for generations. With luck, the young male may inherit this prime territory from his parents. That's his ultimate reward for staying home. Or maybe it'll be one of these young that survives to take over the dynasty, and to witness future years of constant change in the nature of this land, here by a billabong, in the heart of Kakadu.